I'm going to be using a tier list video today to help me break down the real best UFC submissions of 2021, because I watched a video a couple of days ago posted by the UFC itself, and it was called Nominees for the Best Submission of the Year. And honestly, they might as well have renamed it Here's Some Really Big Names That We Want to Promote Getting Really Simple Rear Naked Chokes on Completely Gassed Out Opponents. So I'm going to make the real best submissions of the year using this tier list video. I've got all of the good submissions from the past year hidden around the perimeter of the screen, and I'll slowly reveal them and place them where they belong on the screen in a tier, S through to D tier, and there's only room for one in the S tier ranking, and that will be the best submission of the year in 2021. But let's start straight away with one of the best submissions this year, which was Islam Makhachev versus Dan Hooker. I'm trying to use little pictures of it going on. Of course, this is Makhachev twisting the arm off of Dan Hooker. I'm going to place this right at C tier, and this shows how good the submissions were this year, because that was a great submission that doesn't get enough credit. I mean, let's be real. Dan Hooker was supposed to be a huge threat for Islam Makhachev, and he took him down and Kimura'd him within minutes of the first round. It was a very dominant win at a very high level of the lightweight division. Two top 10 opponents going at it, and he twisted Hooker's arm off in a couple of minutes in that first round. Very good submission, very nice to watch, but because of it being a Kimura, I kind of see Kimura's as more of like a bully submission move, like an arm triangle. I don't really like those submissions. I like some intricacy, like you've tricked someone into falling into it and stuff like that. Now, I understand there are going to be some people that say there's way more intricacy to a Kimura, dude. But if you're in the right position and you've got the muscle for it, you can wrench that fucking arm off. So I'm going to give it a C tier, an amazing submission, but not quite as intricate as some of the other submissions that are going to be higher up in the higher tiers of S, A, and B. Let's move on to another submission that happened this year, which was Charles Oliveira versus Dustin Poirier, standing rear naked choke. The level of it makes me want to go A tier. I think I'm going to have to go A tier. I'm going to have to go A tier with Charles Oliveira versus Dustin Poirier standing rear naked choke, because to be pulling off standing rear naked chokes in championship bouts, I mean, there was way more intricacy that went into this standing rear naked choke as well. I know I'm making it sound a bit simple, because it's not like a crazy inverted this and fucking 360 inverted fucking Boston Crab or anything like that. But either way, Charles Oliveira, to pull that off in a championship bout after going what he went through in the earlier rounds, being dropped a couple of times, being partially concussed, I'm sure, dominating the second round and then getting this rear naked choke in the third. I mean, he had to tie up one of the arms with his legs, readjust himself a couple of times on the back as well. He tried to go for this in the second round, but he fell off the top, which is what led to them being on the ground in the first place. So he made the adjustment to stay on the back. He even tried a couple of different versions of the rear naked choke grip around the neck of Dustin Poirier, because Poirier was fighting it away a couple of times, and to be doing all of this whilst partially rocked, whilst your nose is shattered, and you're half blind anyway because you're Oliveira, in a championship bout, I think it's got to be an A tier. Amazing submission this year by Charlie Olives. He got it done exactly how I predicted he would as well, by standing rear naked choke. I'm taking that one. Anyway, next one up on the submission of the year list, which is Glover Teixeira versus Jan Blachowicz. I'm putting it a D tier, I'm sorry. It's some fucking lame-ass rear naked choke. Sorry, I'm being a little bit emotional here, because the list that the UFC put forward really fucking annoyed me. Jan Blachowicz was done. Okay, he'd been taken down, dominated in the first round. He gave up his back, and then the rear naked choke was put in, and Jan Blachowicz tapped literally immediately as soon as it was put in. There wasn't much intricacy to this. It was a bullyish submission, because Glover had a massive, massive grappling advantage over Jan Blachowicz, and Blachowicz seemed a little bit mentally switched off in that fight anyway. But either way, Glover Teixeira, amazing rear naked choke in a championship bout on Jan Blachowicz. Was it the most crazy and amazing, and oh my god, how did he fucking pull that off? Not really. It was a rear naked choke. I'm putting it a D tier because of the level that it was pulled off at. Moving on to another submission that happened this year, which was Jordan Levitt versus Matt Sales. It's an inverted triangle. Oh, I wanted to put this at A tier, and I wanted this to be at B tier, but I'm going to make the switch. I think this belongs at B tier. I know it was an inverted triangle. It's very difficult to pull off, but I don't even think he thought he had it. I genuinely believe there's a lot of fighters on the roster in the UFC that probably escaped this submission. Now, it is a very good submission, and when you see it like this, you can kind of understand why he tapped. But we've seen fighters in that position many times before, and they figure out what they need to do to escape that position. And Sales could have made a couple of adjustments to give himself some more room. It wasn't the tightest of inverted triangles that you're going to see. I just feel like it was a great submission, inverted triangle. The level at which it was pulled off at does give it some minus points in my opinion. Great submission, but Matt Sales is not the wizard on the ground. He's not like a level of Dustin Poirier or some of the other guys on this list, like even a Jan Blachowicz, a world champion. So I'm going to put it at B tier because it was a very intricate submission, very difficult to pull off. But I think it was Sales' stupidity that meant that he didn't escape that position, because there are ways that he could go about escaping it. Now, I know Levitt is grabbing his leg here, which is something that he could do, but Sales seemed to be mentally checked out of the grappling exchanges of that bout before he went into that inverted triangle. But it's a great submission, and it's at B tier, and it's probably top 5 submissions of the year. I know I'm trying to be negative here to justify why it isn't higher up on the list, but it's still an amazing submission, and he got an inverted triangle from the fucking side in the 3rd round of a bout as well, where things are even more sweaty, so it's even maybe more impressive. Maybe it was the 2nd round, but either way, it was into a fight that was very, very high-paced. B tier for that submission. Good job, Jordan Levitt, you sus motherfucker. Moving on to another submission that happened this year, which was Vicente Luque versus Tyron Woodley. I'm going to go with C tier for this one as well. They had this as one of the best submissions of the year. This wasn't the best Luque dash choke of the year, okay? Let alone one of the best submissions of the year. It was a good dash choke. Woodley put himself into it though, and this is what I want to talk about with these submissions of the year. A lot of it, I want to see it completely down to the fact that this guy's jiu-jitsu or grappling is this much better than you. Okay? So it was a great dash choke, but Woodley was destroyed on the feet beforehand, wobbling all over the place. He fell into this position on the ground because he'd been concussed on the feet by a left hook. Down he goes. Luque puts in a dash choke and taps out Tyron Woodley. Was it an amazing submission? It was. One of the top submissions of the year. Top 10 submissions of the year in my opinion. But it's going at C tier. Doesn't quite crack the B, A or S tier rankings of submissions. Good submission. Simple dash choke. Woodley put himself in there really, and he choked out Woodley, but it definitely belongs in this list video. Moving on to another submission that happened this year, which was Julian Marquez versus Maki Pitolo. I'm going to go with C tier as well. I think that's a similar sort of situation you can go with there. A comeback win for Julian Marquez, which does make it more impressive, but again, the level of competition is not the highest here. Maki Pitolo was really rocked beforehand, getting beaten up quite badly in that 3rd round, shot a bad takedown into the dash choke, and that's where Julian Marquez sunk it in. A great submission though, he rolled to his back, found the opening. It was a really good submission to pull it out of nowhere, and also I want to mention this, he adjusted it from a guillotine initially. Maki Pitolo shot a takedown out of panic. Julian Marquez had a guillotine, and then he switched it to a dash choke in the middle of the roll. Very good submission. I think it belongs at C tier. Maybe one of the better submissions at C tier this year, but of course the level of competition it was pulled off against maybe doesn't score it too highly up the submission score, but I'm going to put it at C tier here. A great submission this year by Julian Marquez. Definitely belongs on the list. Moving on to another submission that happened this year, which was Rodolfo Vieira versus Dustin Stoltzfus. I'm putting this one at D tier as well. Amazing rear naked choke. Really good rear naked choke. Standing rear naked choke as well if you didn't see it, but it ended up going to the ground once a guy tapped because you fall over eventually unless you're against a cage like Oliveira and Poirier. But amazing submission by Rodolfo Vieira. 3rd round, he's starting to get pressured a little bit. He finds the back take in the standing open of the octagon when they're in the middle of it, standing up in the open of the octagon, wraps him up, grabs onto the back like a fucking... I don't even know how to describe the way he took the back. I mean, human backpack is actually the perfect way of saying this. He went over one shoulder and wrapped around the other way and found his position on the back in the centre of the octagon and put on a really good rear naked choke in the 3rd round. I think this is one of the better rear naked chokes this year. So I'm putting it at D tier. Hard to get on this list as a rear naked choke, so you're going to have to go in D tier, but at the same time, one of the better rear naked chokes this year. Arguably maybe the best rear naked choke this year in my opinion. Moving on to another submission that happened this year, which was, speaking of rear naked chokes, Brandon Moreno versus Deiveson Figueiredo 2, the rematch. Brandon Moreno submits him in the 3rd round, I believe it was, by rear naked choke. It was a good rear naked choke. Figueiredo kind of gave it up a bit. He fought the hands, of course, but Moreno already had it in under the chin. Figueiredo tried to get back up after a scramble in a takedown situation, and Moreno just found his way onto the back of Figueiredo and put in the choke. Amazing. At a championship level, yes, but a rear naked choke on a gassed out opponent that you've already dropped beforehand in that fight, also yes. So I'm putting it a D tier, although it was an amazing situation. I think more people like the fact, when people are voting for this, if this gets voted as for the best submission of the year, people will vote for it based on the fact that they liked seeing Moreno win the World Championship, which is okay for them. They can vote on that, but I'm looking for the delicacy and the intricacy of the submission. He put a rear naked choke in on a gassed out opponent who got dropped beforehand, who gave up his back. Good submission, good rear naked choke, but I'm not putting it up the top of this tier list. Amazing, no, and definitely deserves its spot for being at a championship level. Moving on to another submission that happened this year, which was Patsabatini versus Jamal Emmers. You know what? It's going at A tier. I think it belongs at A tier this year. If you don't know about this submission, go and check it out. Patsabatini got really, really badly dropped by Jamal Emmers. And it looked like Emmers is about to fucking finish this guy. He's taking mount, he's pounding away, looking for big shots. Out of nowhere, Sabatini finds a leg. Then Emmers, because he's the more conscious of the two of them, because Sabatini is still fucking scrambled in his brain right now, after being dropped by, I believe it was like a straight right hand, square on the chin in the first round, and down goes Sabatini. He's semi-conscious, Emmers is fully conscious, and you may be thinking, wait, Sabatini got a submission over Emmers? Is Sabatini the black guy because he's twisting on his fucking foot? No. He's reversing this position in a 50-50, and he's got a knee bar here. No, it was a heel hook, wasn't it? I believe it was a heel hook over Jamal Emmers, and he's got it right here, and I think he's just let go of it at this position. No, he hasn't quite got it yet in this position, but he's about to get it on this foot. Wraps it under his armpit, twists it the correct way, and rips apart the knee of Jamal Emmers. A knee bar, or sorry, a heel hook, sorry, it was a heel hook position that he got in. Can't even remember the real submission that he got. I think it was a heel hook, though. It looks like it could be a knee bar from this position, but it was a heel hook submission, went for the twist, and I think it was just amazing to see him pull it off, because the guy was literally fucking about to be finished. Dominated, destroyed in the first round, and he turns it all around by going for a leg and being better in the 50-50 position and earning himself a heel hook and destroying the knee of Jamal Emmers in a comeback victory after being dropped. What more can I say? He's pulling off more intricate submissions than some of these other guys down here whilst semi-concussed, like his fight's about to be over and his career might be over as well. Patsabatini, comeback win over Jamal Emmers, who arguably could have beat Giga Chikadze, by the way. So not the lowest of levels. They're bantamweights, of course, or they're featherweights, sorry, so they're always going to be good. But yeah, great heel hook from Patsabatini, coming back after being dropped moments beforehand, like literally moments beforehand. Must have been about 30 seconds before this submission was put in. Patsabatini gets it done in the comeback sub. Moving on to another submission that happened this year, which was Amanda Nunes versus Megan Anderson. I'm putting it at B tier. I can't put this at A tier. I really like this submission. It's a really good submission. It's an inverted triangle over the top, like Beneil Dariush got on Drew Dober, basically, is what they're going for here. Like an armbar as well as it turned into. She can't really get a choke from here. Couldn't really get a choke, at least anyway, in Megan Anderson's case. Went for the arm, tried to snap it off with her fucking shoulder, tried to put it underneath her shoulder and crank it that way. Eventually did get the armbar from like an inverted triangle position. It was like a triangle armbar, I guess you can call it, like an inverted triangle armbar that she got on Megan Anderson, but Megan Anderson's just so shit that it's hard to give credit for that. Like, I understand this is a really good intricate submission, but Megan Anderson's really shit, and she was dropped before this, and really badly hurt on the feet before this, and she was almost finished by TKO just before this happened. So she was basically doing an inverted armbar, an inverted triangle armbar drill on a dummy, essentially. But she got it done. It was a very good win at a championship level, which I guess you can say technically, because it's women's fucking featherweight, because Anderson must have been on a fucking colossal 2-fight win streak, so she's ready to fight the best in the world. But either way, a good submission. Definitely belongs at B tier. One of the best submissions of the year for sure. Probably one of the better submissions at B tier. I'll give it more credit than I will give it to Jordan Levitt, but I think I'm giving it this one. B tier. Top of B tier, Nunes gets an amazing submission over Megan Anderson, although it was on a Megan Anderson who was basically done before that happened anyway, and was just letting Nunes choose what submission she wanted to do to her. Moving on to another submission that happened this year, which was... Ooh, this is Gamrot versus Jeremy Stephens. I'm putting it at C tier as well. Similar to Dan Hooker versus Islam Makhachev. Maybe at a little bit of a lower level, but I would argue a cleaner fucking Kimura, in my opinion. And not to mention, Dan Hooker was vulnerable on the ground. He didn't have anything himself. He was in a bad position. He got Kimura'd because of it, being in that bad position. But Mateusz Gamrot was in the middle of an attempted Kimura on himself. Jeremy Stephens was going for a Kimura against Mateusz Gamrot. Of course, if you don't have the dominant position, that means you run a risk of getting Kimura'd yourself as a counter-attack. And that's exactly what Mateusz Gamrot did. Got him down in the first round. Jeremy Stephens went for a Kimura on bottom, which he actually had the grip for pretty well. Gamrot had to stay very composed, very careful on top. Eventually, he found his opportunity to break the grip of Jeremy Stephens and turned it into his own reverse Kimura in the first round, immediately into the fight when they're both fresh. No one's rocked, no one's concussed. It was a great submission though by Kimura from Mateusz Gamrot, and one of his most dominant wins of his career so far inside the UFC or KSW. So great win from Mateusz Gamrot, amazing Kimura, putting him at C tier along the likes of similar submissions like Makhachev Hooker. Although this was a cooler looking Kimura, I would say this is a more impressive one considering the stakes and the level of competition. Stephens, maybe best days are behind him at this point. Moving on to another submission that happened this year, which was... What is this? Oh! Maria Agapova versus Sabina Marzo. How could I forget about this one? Really good submission. One of the better rear naked chokes this year. This is probably the second best rear naked choke this year. No, Oliveira Poirier's is the best. What the fuck am I talking about? Oliveira Poirier is the best rear naked choke this year. But out of these D tier rear naked chokes, this is the second best behind Vieira versus Stoltzfus, because this was a really good one. I know she rocked her beforehand, but if you actually watch the rear naked choke, it's pretty cool looking. Marzo fell down on all fours in the doggy position. I don't know any other way of describing that position other than doggy. She was in doggy, ready for the choke to be placed on her. And then Agapova didn't need any more fucking invitation. She jumped straight on the fucking neck. Really did. Jumped on it, slid the choke in, put the hooks in, rolled her over, got the rear naked choke. It was the quickest rear naked choke I've seen put in on an opponent who you don't have control over in the first place, ever in UFC history. It was very quick. As soon as Marzo hit the ground, Agapova pounced, basically. And I mean that. She pounced on that rear naked choke. I don't use that word lightly. She jumped on, secured it, put the hooks in, all in one swift motion, and got the rear naked choke in that fight very impressively. I know it wasn't against the highest level of competition, so I'm not going to put it too high up on this list. But again, it was a pretty decent submission, and I do respect that. Even though she did rock Sabina Marzo beforehand, and of course I've mentioned other people on this list don't get the credit they get because they're facing a rocked opponent, this is still worthy of a good position in my opinion, because just the cleanliness and the quickness that she put it in, and also I'm not expecting much from women's flyweight, so whenever they do something that somewhat impresses me, I'm extra impressed. So there's even more of an advantage for them knowing how bad they usually are. Moving on to another submission that happened this year, which was... Christian Aguilera versus Carlston Harris. The only Anaconda Choke this year, I do believe. He got an Anaconda Choke on Christian Aguilera, and it was a really good one, and again, he adjusted it midway through. Went for a certain choke, didn't like it, went for the Anaconda instead, rolled him over and got the job done. Anaconda Choke on Christian Aguilera. First round, dominance, they're both fresh, they're both with it. Very dangerous opponent in Christian Aguilera with a lot of power in his hands. Carlston Harris went out there and handled him pretty easily and got that choke in the first round with an Anaconda Choke. Really good stuff, really impressive, rolled him over, made sure he couldn't really get his grip on the legs of Carlston Harris to try and close up the distance of that choke and find himself on top in half guard or something like that. Rolled him over Makwana Mirkani style, the way he does when he rolls people over in that Anaconda Choke position. He's one of the best at doing the Anaconda Chokes in the UFC in my opinion. But again, amazing Anaconda Choke, a different submission that we don't see much of, with a different grip, and he got the job done. Very good job by Carlston Harris in the first round against a Pretty dangerous opponent, not the highest level guy, don't get me wrong, but again, very good submission, and the only Anaconda Choke this year, in my opinion, if I remember correctly. Moving on to another submission that happened this year, which was Luque versus Chiesa. We're putting Luque versus Chiesa in the A-tier section. I have to give respect to this submission. It was a great one. This was better than the Chiesa... This was better than the Luque Woodley submission. And they nominated Luque versus Woodley as the submission of the year. Like, I don't know what anti-Jake Paul propaganda they were fucking trying to pull, but the Chiesa Dash Choke was way better than the Woodley one. Woodley was out of it, destroyed. He was like being KO'd, and in the process of being KO'd, and Luque showed mercy with a Dash Choke, rather than pounding in the face of Tyron Woodley and finishing him by TKO. Here, Chiesa was dominating the grappling. He had Luque down. He was fighting for rear naked chokes. Luque had to escape rear naked choke positions. Chiesa also went for like an inverted triangle at one point and then tried to turn it into a triangle. And Luque had to escape those positions and find his way on top. Then as Chiesa rolls over and goes up for a takedown to find himself on top, Luque snatches up the Dash Choke. Gator rolls him over to find space and secures himself the Dash Choke in the first round against a very high level opponent in Michael Chiesa and a great jiu-jitsu specialist himself. So, I'm putting Luque in the A-tier section. That was the best Dash Choke. Why did they nominate the Woodley Luque Dash Choke? Nowhere near the level. He slowly put it in on Woodley, who was semi-concussed and basically asking to lose by submission at that point in the fight because he fell forward into it. Chiesa was in the middle of a grappling scramble with Luque after dominating the grappling scrambles beforehand. Maybe that'll be a trademark term. Scrappling. The grappling scrambles were dominated by Chiesa beforehand, and out of nowhere, Luque fucking cinches it up. Boom, boom, grip is in, rolls him over with a gator roll, and gets the job done by Dash Choke. Good one by Luque, putting him at A-tier. Moving on to another submission that happened this year, which was... Alejandro Perez versus Johnny Eduardo. Amazing submission. Like a modified armbar with a leg grip here, like a TP on the legs almost like an arm, like a triangle on the arm, like an arm triangle, but on the actual arm here to get this inverted armbar or modified armbar that he got. And he sort of got like a scarf hold position over here, Alexei Olenek style. And it was a great submission. It wasn't the highest level. Johnny Eduardo's not a spring chicken anymore. He was gassing out at this point in the fight as well. So that does leave you like a free ability to submit a guy however you want. But he had a scarf hold here and then used that scarf hold when he realized he couldn't choke out Perez or couldn't choke out Eduardo with the scarf hold. He used that scarf hold to secure himself with one arm, a modified armbar, and a straight armbar with his legs as the fucking leverage for them, and just fucking thrusted his hips into the elbow joint of Johnny Eduardo, who's a black belt in jiu-jitsu as well. So amazing submission by Alejandro Perez. I'm putting him at B tier. Level of competition, not the highest, but again, innovative, creative submissions and technicality of the whole thing. Definitely some high scores. I'm putting Alejandro Perez's submission at the B tier area. It just would have been more impressive to me if Johnny Eduardo wasn't completely gasping for air because he's literally fucking 40-something years of age. Either way, moving on to another submission that happened this year, which was Khamzat Chimaev versus Jinliang. Man, people are going to be angry about this. Yeah, D tier as a fucking rear naked choke. Really good rear naked choke. Really good rear naked choke. Amazing rear naked choke. But fucking D tier. Yeah, I'm saying because it wasn't the most impressive. He took the back, he pounded out Jinliang, fought for it a couple of times. There were some adjustments made, so I am going to give him credit. A good rear naked choke, it was a very clean one. Put the choke in, right under the neck, hid the hand behind the head as well to get the finish. Jinliang just couldn't do anything about the grappling of Khamzat Chimaev. It's not like Jinliang was concussed or like gassed out on the ground, although he probably was concussed really because he took a lot of behind the ear shots from TKO. from like the back mount position, he took a lot of behind the ear shots that looked like it could have ended up being a TKO if that kept going for a couple more moments. But other than that, great submission from Khamzat Chimaev against Li Jinliang. Fought through it a couple of times. Li Jinliang made him adjust the grip a couple of times as well to give him some things to think about, and Chimaev adjusted the grip accordingly. Hid the hand, got the rear naked choke. It was a solid rear naked choke and one of the better ones this year. So I'm putting it at D tier in the submissions of the year list. Moving on to someone else who got a submission this year, which was Anthony Hernandez versus Rodolfo Vieira. Amazing submission this year that went down. Really good win by Anthony Hernandez over Rodolfo Vieira. Got an arm in guillotine. Very difficult to do, especially against the level of opponent that Rodolfo Vieira is. Really good submission against like a 4-time, 5-time Abu Dhabi world champion in grappling. Really impressive to submit a guy like that. Ridiculously impressive. Crazily dominant. Against a vegetable edition of Rodolfo Vieira, though. Comeback win. Amazing. Great stuff. Actual ability of the submission-wise, how many points we giving here? Rodolfo Vieira was a fucking shell of himself, begging to be finished at any moment, collapsing forward on the ground because he can't keep himself upright, because he's completely gassed out. I mean gassed. Like, he was walking around the octagon in that second or third round, just walking into shots with his hands down by his waist. He couldn't lift his hands up. That's how tired this man was. He tried a bunch of submissions on Anthony Hernandez in the first round of their fight, and then as the rounds went on, Hernandez started to come back. But I know it was a great submission, which is why I'm putting it at C tier amongst these other really amazing submissions that were achieved. But Vieira was a fucking sack of shit when that submission was achieved. Completely gassed out. Completely concussed as well because Hernandez was beating him up on the feet beforehand. Blooding up his face. Destroying him on the feet. Vieira really gassed out wise. Shoots a really bad takedown. And just basically allows himself to be submitted rather than being TKO'd. So yeah, I'm going to have to put Rodolfo Vieira's submission on the list, or Anthony Hernandez's submission over Rodolfo Vieira on the list at C tier, because it was a good arm in triangle, an arm in guillotine, for fuck's sake. It was a good arm in guillotine, but again, yeah, I'm saying, look at these beauties of submissions. You can't put it amongst them. Good comeback of the year though, but not the best submission of the year in my opinion. And now we get to the S tier submission, the champ. As I frantically try and find it from around the edge of the screen, it's right here. And it's Andre Muniz versus Jacare Souza. You can't really tell what's going on in this picture, but this is the best one of the submission. He takes the back of Jacare Souza. And that's where this submission begins, okay? That's already impressive enough. Oh, you took the back of Jacare fucking Souza? That's where the impressiveness just begins, and that's already really impressive to me. Whilst in the middle of falling off of the back of Jacare Souza, and I mean this, Jacare's shaking him off the back because of the high-level jiu-jitsu guy that he is. He's shaking Andre Muniz off of his back after Muniz went for a rear naked choke and overextended himself a little bit too much. Jacare started shimmying him off the top, and as he is falling off of the rear naked choke, in the middle of falling towards the canvas, where he would end up being on bottom against Jacare Souza, one of the worst places you can be in a fight ever. Unless you're Kevin Holland, I guess. But either way, whilst he's falling off the back, he adjusts it to like a straight arm bar from the side angle, off of the back position, wraps up the head with his leg over the top, cranks on the arm sort of behind his shoulder to get that extra leverage, and he snaps the arm of Jacare Souza. Really good submission from Anthony Hernandez. What am I talking about? Andre Muniz. These fucking names. There's so many of them. Andre Muniz. Amazing submission over Jacare Souza. Switches it to a straight armbar behind the shoulder at a fucking weird angle whilst falling off the back of Jacare Souza, the legend in jiu-jitsu and grappling himself, in the middle of the biggest fight of his career. I'm going to have to give it to Andre Muniz. Now, some honourable mentions that I did not put in for very specific reasons. Paul Craig should maybe have been in this video, but I didn't put him in the video purely because it wasn't a submission. but it kind of should have been a submission. In my opinion, I would have put that submission at A tier or something like that. Now again, it was a TKO because Hill didn't tap. He didn't need to tap. He apparently was fine in that position because if you don't know, Hill has got a very tiny head, so he has to be in a real tight fucking triangle if you're going to tap him there. He didn't tap to the armbar either, although it was a great armbar. He didn't technically get submitted by Paul Craig. He got TKO'd because of the elbows to the head, and he couldn't tap because he didn't feel like he needed to tap. He was still there afterwards, conscious. So it wasn't technically a successful submission, but I would actually put Paul Craig around the A tier area of this fight. And apart from that, the other mention that maybe should be put in here as like an honourable mention would be Juliana Pena versus Amanda Nunes. But I'm only counting actual submissions because that wasn't in at all. Wasn't in. So I'm not putting it on here. It wasn't a submission. It was over the face. There was no angle. There was no squeeze. I know she says, I would have snapped her jaw in half. No, you wouldn't. Ever. No, you're a woman. But at the same time, it was good submission. Good comeback win. I'm just looking for submissions that are fucking in. You know what I mean? I'm not looking for submissions that aren't even in. There's no squeeze on them. There's no leverage whatsoever. And the person you're putting this fake submission on just randomly fucking gives up in the middle of it because she's a bitch. So I'm not going to give that points. But I'm putting it as an honourable mention. Just outside of these other rear naked chokes, I guess you could put another imaginary Juliana Pena versus Amanda Nunes. And then over here you can put Paul Craig versus Jamal Hill. Maybe you could put it here as well in the B tier area. But either way, great submissions this year. I hope you guys agree with my list. I think this was the most intricate and amazing submission of the year. Andre Muniz, Jacare Souza. I mean, Muniz got another great armbar against Hernandez that could be mentioned, and probably would be mentioned in a D tier area as well. So let me know what one should have been in here that I maybe missed, because I can't add all of them on here because there's only so much room. But maybe I could have fitted in Juliana Pena, Amanda Nunes here, Hernandez, Andre Muniz over here, and then Paul Craig's submission somewhere at A or B tier. But there you go. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Click that button up there. Toodle pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye.